My husband Lucas went blind on a snowy mountain, and I gave up everything to care for him for 5 years. On the day he regained his sight, he removed the bandages, bypassed me, and embraced my best friend Lydia. He cried, saying, "Lydia, thank you for your unwavering companionship over these 5 years." Watching them, my heart filled with joy and excitement. As early as 3 years ago, I knew he was pretending to be blind. His current recovery was merely to better kick me out and be with his mistress. And now, since he has made it so obvious, I might as well confess to him. Confess how he became penniless over these years. You can remove it now. As soon as the doctor's words fell, Lucas's hand impatiently covered the bandages that had been wrapped for 5 years. Lucas's parents, my in-laws, held their breath in anticipation, their faces unable to suppress the excitement. Lydia stood by the bed, her eyes red-rimmed, hands clasped tightly in front of her chest. And I stood farthest from the bed, watching quietly. When the last layer of bandage was unveiled, Lucas's tightly closed eyes trembled under the glaring light. Slowly, very slowly, he opened his eyes. At first, there was confusion, his pupils searching for focus. Then, his gaze swept over his excited parents, over me, and finally landed on Lydia's face. As if crossing thousands of mountains and rivers, he had finally found his home. He bypassed me, opened his arms, and tightly, very tightly, embraced Lydia in his arms. Lydia. His voice was hoarse, filled with the ecstasy and fear of regaining what was lost. I can see now, I can finally see you. Thank you for your unwavering companionship these 5 years. Lydia sobbed uncontrollably in his arms, pounding his back. Lucas, that's great, you're finally better. What a touching scene of reunion after a long separation. If only the protagonist wasn't mistaken. My mother-in-law reacted, tugging at my sleeve, her face showing some embarrassment. Sylvia, look at Lucas, he just regained his sight, his mind isn't clear yet. I smiled and shook my head. No, his mind was very clear. Clear enough to hug the person he truly wanted to hug first thing. Watching the two embracing and crying, my heart was filled with jubilation. Finally, this day had arrived. 5 years ago, Lucas encountered an avalanche during a mountain climb, narrowly escaping death, and after being rescued, his eyes could no longer see. That year, we had just been married for 1 year. He went from being a favored son of heaven to a disabled person needing constant care. His temper became irritable and gloomy, throwing things, cursing people, like a trapped beast. It was I who quit my job, gave up everything, and stayed by his side day and night. Feeding him, bathing him, reading news to him, taking him for rehabilitation. For a full 2 years. I went from a pampered young lady who never lifted a finger to an all-around nanny. Friends all said I was foolish. I only said, he is my husband. The change happened 3 years ago. That day, I carried water into the bedroom, and he thought I was still in the kitchen. I saw with my own eyes him sidestep a water cup I had accidentally knocked over on the floor that morning, his movements smooth, without the slightest hesitation. How could a blind person have such precise anticipation and agile movements? I stood at the door, my blood turning cold in an instant. From that day on, I began to pay attention. I would suddenly turn on a strong flashlight after he fell asleep. His pupils would subconsciously contract. I would pretend to fall in front of him, and although his reaching motion was only half done, I saw it clearly. It turned out he had recovered long ago. He had been pretending all along. But why? Until that night, when he thought I was sound asleep, he took his phone to the balcony. I followed him out. He lowered his voice, his tone one of gentleness and indulgence I had never heard before. Lydia, wait a little longer, it's almost time. Once the company is fully on track, once I secure all the assets, I'll confront her. She's still useful to me now, this free nanny, might as well use her. Be good, I know you've been wronged, I'll make it up to you later. My best friend, Lydia. The one who came to the house every day to accompany me, urging me to be strong, saying she would always stand by my side. It turned out they had long been having an affair. It turned out that my 2 years of dedication, in his eyes, were nothing more than a free nanny, might as well use her. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. At dawn, I made a decision. You want to wait? Fine. I'll play along. But the ending of this play will be written by me. Lucas, let go of Lydia first, let the doctor check you again. My father-in-law cleared his throat twice, trying to break the awkward situation. Only then did Lucas reluctantly let go of Lydia, but he still held her hand tightly. He looked at me, without guilt, but with scrutiny. Sylvia, you've worked hard these 5 years. A light you've worked hard was his explanation for my 5 years of youth. I tugged at the corner of my mouth but said nothing. My mother-in-law came over, patting the back of my hand. Sylvia, our aloof family won't mistreat you. Now that Lucas is better, you can relax and enjoy life from now on. Enjoy life? Probably get kicked out. The doctor conducted a series of checks on Lucas, confirming his vision had fully recovered. The family happily handled the discharge procedures. Back home, my mother-in-law prepared a large table of dishes, saying it was to welcome Lucas back. At the dinner table, my in-laws and Lydia surrounded Lucas, asking about this and that. Can you really see everything clearly? Is there any discomfort? What do you want to eat? Mom will make it for you tomorrow. I sat silently in the corner like an outsider, listening to their laughter and chatter. Lucas seemed to finally remember my existence. He put down his chopsticks, wiped his mouth with a napkin. Sylvia. He spoke, and everyone quieted down, looking at me. These years, the household and company matters have all been on your shoulders, it's been tough for you. He paused, his tone becoming matter of fact. Now that I'm better, these things should be returned to me. He extended his hand toward me. The company's official seal, financial seal, and the family's bank cards, organize them tomorrow and give them all to me. Lydia chimed in from the side, her voice soft and dripping with sweetness. Yes, Sister Sylvia, now you can finally rest. Lucas is so capable, the company will definitely be better than before under him. Her face showed an understanding smile, but the impatience in her eyes couldn't be hidden. This operation really made me laugh. His performance deserved an Oscar. I looked at Lucas's palm extended in front of me. It was a hand with distinct knuckles, very beautiful. Once, this hand would gently hold mine, brushing away the stray hairs from my forehead. Now, it mercilessly demanded my last value. I lowered my eyelids and softly said, "Okay." Seeing me agree so readily, Lucas and Lydia exchanged a glance, both seeing triumphant smiles in each other's eyes. My mother-in-law's smile became much more genuine. That's right, Sylvia, rest assured, Lucas won't mistreat you in the future. I nodded, showing a submissive expression. Those things are all in the bank's safe deposit box, I'll go get them tomorrow. Why put them in a safe deposit box? Lucas frowned, obviously dissatisfied with this answer. The house isn't safe, I was afraid they'd get lost. My answer was watertight. He stared at me for a few seconds, trying to discern something from my face. But my expression at that moment was only appropriately tired and docile. He finally withdrew his gaze. Fine, go early tomorrow. The meal ended in a strangely harmonious atmosphere. My in-laws left satisfied. Lydia made an excuse to stay and talk with Lucas. I tactfully said, "You chat, I'll go upstairs to take a shower." I went up to the second floor and stopped at the corner of the stairs. Soon, uncontrollable laughter came from the living room downstairs. "I told you she wouldn't do anything, you've got her completely under control." It was Lydia's voice. "Just a stupid woman who can't live without a man." Lucas's voice was full of contempt. If not for her being obedient these years, I would have kicked her out the first day I regained my sight. "When will we get married?" "What's the rush?" "Wait until I get everything in hand. Then, give her an old rundown place in the suburbs, that'll be fair enough for her." "You're so bad." "Do you like it?" What followed were nauseating flirtations and kissing sounds. I listened expressionlessly, even feeling a bit like laughing. "An old rundown place in the suburbs?" "Lucas, you're as confident as ever about yourself." The next day, I got up early. Lucas and Lydia were still sleeping upstairs. Last night's battle must have been intense, they were probably exhausted. I applied delicate makeup, changed into a sharp professional outfit. Facing myself in the mirror, I showed a long-lost smile. "Sylvia, welcome back." I didn't go to the bank. Instead, I went straight to the company. This company was founded by Lucas before marriage, but after his blindness, it had long been fully managed by me. Over the past 3 years, I took advantage of his blindness to have him sign countless documents. Equity transfer agreements, asset mortgage contracts. Step by step, like a diligent ant, I moved everything under his name to mine. Now, Lucas Tech, the legal representative is me, the largest shareholder is also me. Lucas is just a minor shareholder with less than 1% of the shares. I gathered all the company's executives for a brief meeting. I announced Mr. Lucas's honorable retirement and the new direction for the company's future development. The executives looked at each other, but no one raised objections. Over these years, under my leadership, the company's performance had been soaring, they saw it with their own eyes. They knew clearly who could lead them to make money. After handling company matters, I went to the real estate transaction center. The villa we currently live in, as well as the other 2 apartments under Lucas's name, the owners had long been changed to my name. I listed the current apartment with a real estate agency, entrusting them to sell it quickly. After all, the address left for Lucas's debts is here. When I returned home, it was already afternoon. Lucas and Lydia were sitting on the living room sofa. Seeing me return empty-handed, Lucas's face immediately darkened. "Where are the things?" "The bank's safe deposit box is under system maintenance today, can't access it." I casually made up an excuse. "System maintenance?" He obviously didn't believe it, his voice suddenly rising. "Do you take me for a 3-year-old? "Sylvia, I asked you to get some things, is it that hard?" After regaining his sight, he didn't even bother to pretend, his irritable nature fully exposed. Lydia quickly came to smooth things over, linking her arm with Lucas's, soothing him softly. "Lucas, don't be angry, Sister Sylvia definitely didn't mean it. Banks always have some unexpected issues. Sister Sylvia, why not give the key to Lucas and let him go himself? He wants to get familiar with the situation quickly to share the burden with you. Truly my good best friend, always thinking of my beloved man." I looked at her and suddenly smiled. "Lydia, there's something I've always wanted to ask you." "What is it?" "Didn't you say back then that you hate homewreckers the most?" Lydia's face instantly became awkward. Lucas was also stunned. "Sylvia, what do you mean?" "Nothing." I put away my smile, my expression turning cold, just suddenly remembered, casually asking. The atmosphere in the living room instantly dropped to freezing. They both saw that I didn't want to act anymore. Lucas's patience was completely exhausted, he suddenly stood up, walked in front of me, looking down at me. "I don't care what madness you're having today, tomorrow, I must see the things." Otherwise, Sylvia, you know the consequences. The threat in his eyes was undisguised. Meeting his gaze, I spoke word by word. Lucas, have you forgotten that you've been blind for 5 years? Many things have long changed. What do you mean? Speak clearly. Lucas grabbed my wrist. I winced in pain but didn't struggle. It means, I lifted my head, staring into his angry eyes, the things you want, I can't give. Say that again. He roared, the veins on his forehead bulging. I said, I can't give them. I repeated calmly. How dare you? He raised his hand. The slap ultimately didn't fall. It was stopped by Lydia. Lucas. Calm down. Talk nicely, don't hit. She clung tightly to Lucas's arm, looking at me in panic. Sister Sylvia, don't argue with Lucas, you know his temper isn't good, hurry and take out the things. She was still acting. Acting the kind, innocent, conflicted saint. I shook off Lucas's hand, rubbing my reddened wrist. Lucas, I'll give you one more chance. I looked at him, and also at Lydia behind him. Now, you two, immediately, right now, get out of this house. I can pretend nothing happened, not sue you for embezzlement and fraud. Otherwise. Otherwise what? Lucas seemed to have heard the biggest joke. Sylvia, have you lost your mind? This is my house. You're telling me to get out? He pointed at the floor under his feet, at our huge wedding photo on the wall, his face full of absurdity and mockery. I'll say it one last time, tomorrow morning at 10, hand over all the things intact to me. Otherwise, we'll see you in court. He pulled Lydia, turning to go upstairs. Stop. I called them. Slowly from my bag, I took out a document. I think you should look at this first. I threw the document onto the coffee table in front of them. Lucas glanced impatiently, and the next second, his pupils contracted sharply. It was a property ownership certificate. In black and white, clear as day. The owner column had my name, Sylvia. And the property address was this valuable villa under our feet. What's going on? Lucas picked up the document, flipping it over and over, as if trying to find a hole in it. This is impossible. This must be fake. Sylvia, you actually forged national documents. He was like a cat whose tail was stepped on, instantly bristling. Lydia also leaned over to look, her face draining of color. Lucas, this seems real. Shut up. Lucas roared at her, then glared at me fiercely. Sylvia, what exactly did you do? What did I do? I looked at him amusedly. Not just this villa. I slowly took out several more documents from my bag, spreading them out one by one in front of them. The other 2 apartments under your name, your Porsche, and your proud company. Now, they are all mine. Each document was like a heavy hammer, smashing hard into Lucas and Lydia's hearts. Lucas's breathing became more rapid, his face turning from flushed to ashen, and finally to pale white. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. I never signed these documents. He muttered to himself, as if mad. You did sign them. I calmly shattered his illusion. Over 3 years, you signed countless ones. When you ordered me, this free nanny, to hand you documents and sign them in the dark, you personally gave them all to me. You. He finally understood. He thought he was the hunter in control, unaware that from 3 years ago, he had already become my prey. He pointed at me, trembling with anger, unable to say a word. Pfft. Lucas spat out a mouthful of blood, splattering the documents on the coffee table red. His body swayed, falling straight backward. Lucas! Lydia screamed, supporting him. The living room was in chaos. I watched all this coldly and dialed 911. Hello, this is XX Road XX number, someone has a sudden illness, need an ambulance. Hanging up the phone, I walked in front of them, looking down at Lucas, held in Lydia's arms, his face pale as paper. Lucas, stop pretending. If you can't handle this blow, how can you play with me? He suddenly opened his eyes, the hatred in them almost devouring me. Sylvia, you're so ruthless. Not as ruthless as you. I squatted down, meeting his eyes levelly. To live happily with your mistress, you pretended to be blind for 5 years, using your wife's love and guilt, treating her as a free nanny. Lucas, in terms of ruthlessness, I can only hold your shoes. My words were like a knife, each one stabbing into his heart. He was so angry his lips trembled. The ambulance arrived quickly. Lucas was lifted onto the stretcher. Lydia followed tearfully onto the vehicle. Before leaving, she turned back, looking at me with venom. Sylvia, you won't succeed. Lucas won't let you go. I waved at her, smiling brightly. Okay, I'll wait. The world was finally quiet. Looking at the messy living room, I leisurely put those documents back into my bag. Then, I went upstairs and entered their bedroom. Lydia's things weren't many, a few clothes, some cosmetics. I found a garbage bag and swept all her things into it. Then, I threw all of Lucas's clothes into the garbage bag too. I carried several large garbage bags to the door and threw them all into the trash bin. After doing all this, I felt every pore in my body relax. Lucas stayed in the hospital for 1 day and returned. It was just anger attacking his heart, nothing serious. Upon returning, the first thing he did was rush into my room, trying to snatch those documents. Of course, he failed. I had long transferred all important documents to a safe place. He ransacked the room, making it a mess, but ultimately found nothing. He was like a trapped beast, roaring and cursing in the house. Sylvia, you venomous woman. I'll kill you. Give me back my things. I sat on the living room sofa, leisurely drinking tea, letting him rage upstairs. Lydia sat opposite me, eyes red, looking pitiful. Sister Sylvia, I know you hate us. But you can't do things so absolutely. Lucas is still your husband after all, your years of relationship. Stop. I put down the teacup, interrupting her. Lydia, put away your hypocritical act, it makes me want to vomit. Her face stiffened. Aren't you very disappointed now? I looked at her, smiling maliciously. You schemed for 5 years, thinking you could finally become Lucas's wife, possessing billions in assets. In the end, Lucas became penniless. Your dream of marrying into wealth is shattered. I didn't. She refuted agitatedly. I truly love Lucas. No matter what he becomes, I won't leave him. Is that so? I raised an eyebrow. That's really touching. I took out my phone, opened a video, and placed it in front of her. In the video, it was an intimate photo of Lydia and a middle-aged man. The man was pot-bellied, with a Mediterranean hairstyle, his hand improperly placed on Lydia's waist. I recognized this man. He was a major client of Lucas's company, Raymond. This Raymond just divorced last month. I heard it was because his wife discovered he was keeping a young beautiful woman outside. As I spoke, I observed Lydia's expression. Her face had turned as white as paper. I'm not curious about your relationship with Raymond. I just want to remind you. I leaned close to her ear, whispering, Raymond's ex-wife is no pushover. If she knows you're that woman, guess what she'll do to you? Lydia fled in panic. Watching her fleeing figure, I was in a great mood. This video, of course, was shot by someone I hired. The photos were also photoshopped. But so what? Lydia had a guilty conscience, and Raymond's ex-wife was notoriously shrewish. true or false, it didn't matter anymore. As long as it made her frantic, my goal was achieved. The roaring upstairs gradually stopped. Lucas dragged his tired steps down from upstairs. His hair was messy, eyes bloodshot, the whole person looking decadent and disheveled. The once spirited man was nowhere to be seen. He sat opposite me, his voice hoarse. "Sylvia, let's talk." "Talk about what?" I asked knowingly. "Talk about how you'll kick me out and give me an old rundown place?" He was choked speechless by me, his face alternating between green and white. After a long while, he difficultly spoke. "What exactly do you want?" "Simple," I looked at him. "Divorce." "Impossible." He refused without thinking. "Sylvia, I won't divorce you. Don't think you can monopolize my property alone." "Your property?" I laughed. "Lucas, do you still have property now?" I took out a document from my bag and pushed it in front of him. "This is the divorce agreement, I've already signed it. In the property division section, I've written clearly, all marital property to me, all debts to you." "Debts?" He seemed to have heard a joke. "Where do I have debts?" "You'll know soon." I stood up, not wanting to waste more words with him. "I'll give you 3 days to consider. After 3 days, if you don't sign, we won't meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Instead, your lovely creditors will come personally to find you." In the end, Lucas didn't sign. His inherent pride made him unable to accept such humiliating terms. He even hired a lawyer, wanting to sue me for embezzling property. The lawyer listened to his account, looked at the various personally signed documents I had prepared, then tactfully advised him to give up. "Mr. Lucas, legally speaking, these transfers and gifts are valid. Your chance of winning is almost zero." Lucas was so angry he cursed the lawyer out on the spot. He started thinking of ways himself. He went to the bank to check transactions, caused trouble at the company, appealed at the housing authority. But without exception, he was turned away. All procedures were legal and compliant, with no flaws to be found. He was like a headless fly, bumping around everywhere, only to gain despair time after time. And I began my first step of liquidation. I stopped paying interest on several large loans Lucas personally bore. Those loans were borrowed in his personal name a few years ago to leverage a big project. Later, the project failed, and the loans were dragged on. It was I who, over these years, used the company's money to quietly pay the interest for him, preventing the issue from erupting. Now, I stopped. The bank's collection notices flew like snowflakes to this villa. At first, Lucas didn't take them seriously, treating them all as trash. Until the bank's lawyer's letter arrived, he finally panicked. He rushed in front of me, questioning. "What's with those loans? Why are they sent here?" "Because the borrower is you." I blinked innocently. "Your own debt, of course you have to pay it yourself." "Sylvia, you schemed against me." He finally reacted, eyes splitting with anger. "Yes." I admitted frankly, "From the moment you decided to pretend to be blind, I've been scheming against you. Now, the game has begun. Lucas, are you ready?" The creditors soon came knocking. Not the vicious gangsters from movies, but suited bank staff and several uniformed legal personnel. They politely presented all documents, then began inventorying and sealing the few remaining personal items under Lucas's name in the house. His valuable watches, the limited edition models in his study, the custom suits in his wardrobe. Even his gaming computer. All were sealed. Lucas tried to stop them but was sternly warned by the legal personnel. "Mr. Lucas, please cooperate with our work. If you resist violently, we will have to take coercive measures." His parents also rushed over. Seeing the scene at home, my mother-in-law almost fainted on the spot. "This, What's going on? Has our home been robbed? My father-in-law directed his spearhead at me. Sylvia. Did you do this? You venomous woman. Where has our Lou family wronged you? He raised his hand to hit me. I didn't dodge, just looked at him coldly. Dad, you'd better think clearly about the consequences of this slap. My gaze made his highly raised hand freeze in midair. He probably remembered that this villa now belongs to whom. If he dared to touch me, I could immediately make their family of 3 homeless. My mother-in-law wailed and lunged over, trying to grab me. Sylvia, have mercy, let our Lucas go. He's still young, he can't have a criminal record. I disgustedly shook off her hand. How did you treat me back then? You watched him treat me like a nanny, watched Lydia enter the house, did you ever say a word for me? Now, coming to beg me? Too late. I turned and went upstairs, shutting all their cries and curses behind the door. The Lou family's world completely collapsed. The huge debts, like a mountain, pressed them breathless. To pay the debts, my in-laws had to sell their own house. From the luxurious rich area, they moved to an old neighborhood. Lucas also completely moved out of this villa. Before leaving, he looked at me with complex eyes. Sylvia, you won. I didn't win, I just took back what I deserved. I corrected him. You'll regret it. He left this sentence, dragging his suitcase, and walked away without looking back. I watched his back without speaking. Regret? The most correct thing I've done in my life is to make him get out of my world. As for Lydia, her days weren't easy either. Raymond's ex-wife was indeed not one to mess with. She had people find Lydia's residence and company, brought a group, and rushed to the downstairs of her company. Pulling banners, scattering flyers, publicizing Lydia and Raymond's glorious deeds to everyone. Mistress Lydia, destroying others' families, deserves a bad end. Lydia was fired from the company, her reputation completely ruined. She wanted to find Lucas, but found he could barely protect himself. The man who once held her in his palms now only impatiently roared when seeing her. Get out. I have no money to support you now. She wanted to go back to Raymond, but he avoided her like the plague. It said she finally slunk back to her hometown and was never heard from again. So satisfying. I sold the villa. Along with the company, transferred it all. With a large sum of money, I left this city that had oppressed me for 5 years. I began a solo world travel. I went to Switzerland, watching the sunrise on snowy mountains. I went to Turkey, riding hot air balloons in Cappadocia. I went to Iceland, chasing the aurora under the midnight starry sky. I buried all the past in the journey. I met many new friends, heard many interesting stories. I discovered that the outside world is far more wonderful than I imagined. Leaving the wrong person, my life instead gained infinite possibilities. I was no longer the wife revolving around husband and family. I was just a free, brand new Sylvia. In the 2nd year of travel, in a cafe in Paris, I received an unexpected call. It was from my ex-mother-in-law. Her voice was aged and tired. Sylvia, it's me. What's the matter? My tone was flat. On the other end, there was a long silence. Then, I heard her suppressed crying. Lucas, he's in trouble. What happened to him? I asked, no ripples in my heart. A few days ago he fought with someone, his eyes were damaged, the doctor said he might never see again. My mother-in-law sobbed uncontrollably on the phone. My hand holding the coffee paused. Retribution? Pretended to be blind for 5 years, and in the end, really blind. This is truly full of dramatic irony. He's now at City 3rd Hospital. Sylvia, I know we wronged you, but, could you, Could you come back to see him? He doesn't listen to anyone now, just chanting your name. Auntie, I interrupted her, we're already divorced. I know. I just thought, you accompanied him for 5 years after all, you too. Those 5 years, I was blind. I said coldly, your son is really blind now, perfect. You can find another woman as blind as I was back then to take care of him. He's miserable enough, why do you still say such things? My mother-in-law's voice sharpened. Miserable? I laughed, everything he's enduring now is self-inflicted. What does it have to do with me? You heartless woman. You'll get retribution. She cursed furiously on the phone. I didn't waste more words with her, directly hung up, and blocked her number. The coffee was a bit cold. I called the waiter and ordered a new hot one. Outside the window, the Seine River shimmered. A couple kissed by the river, smiling sweetly. So nice. My mood wasn't affected at all. Lucas's life or death was no longer important to me. His life, his retribution, had nothing to do with me. All of yesterday's events were like a pebble thrown into a calm lake, stirring up an insignificant ripple,